When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I watched 3 of my grandparents go through cancer. Prostate, ovarian, and colon cancer to be specific. And it was tough. I watched them go through a combination of surgeries, radiation, and chemotherapy. And the grandmother I was closest to went through a lot of chemo. And I watched what she went through. And how weak she got, and tired, and nauseous. And I decided if cancer ever comes for me, and with those kind of odds, it's a pretty good chance it would, I wouldn't go through that. I'd figure out some way to solve my way through that problem. I'd seek out some alternative health treatment. I'd meditate my way through it. I'd overcome it in some way and not put my body through that, my family. It didn't seem like any way to live. It didn't seem like any way to die. It wasn't for me. Well, cancer did come for me just a few months ago. And it's a little different. When you're in your 40s, you have 2 little kids, 8 and 11 years old. You have a beautiful home here in Boulder, beautiful family, a business with 15 employees, and you make some other choices. You decide you have to do what you have to do to get through it. The way I discovered I had cancer was on the heels of another medical issue that seemed like a really big deal at the time, but turned out to be a minor footnote. I tore my knee at the beginning of 2017. Had surgery from my ACL, and I recovered so well from it, got back on my bike so quickly, did all my PT, got off the painkillers, barely took a Tylenol or Motrin, ate really well, that I came back from a bike ride one day, and my neck hurt. And I had a cough, and eventually I had some difficulty swallowing, taking my supplements, and they get stuck in my throat. And I tried to do all the Boulder things that we do here, go to my Rolfer, cranial sacral, acupuncture, but turns out those things help you get through cancer, but they don't actually cure cancer. And last June, my wife dropped everything, and we went to one doctor appointment after another. And what seemed to, be benign at first, and we went through about half a dozen different diagnoses, got more and more severe as the weeks went by. What they thought, some antibiotics might make it go away, or steroids to shrink some swelling in my neck, spring allergies, whatever I was hoping was any of these things, just got worse and worse in the month of June 2017. And eventually, I was diagnosed with primary mediastinal diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's kind of a mouthful. And what that meant is I had 3 tumors growing in my chest. This is your mediastinum. It was news to me. And one of them was growing down towards my heart. The other was growing into my throat. And then there was one in between to keep them company, I guess. And I flew out and got a second opinion about what could be done, and got all my medical files in order, got all the biopsies, bone marrow biopsies, everything, CT scans, PET scans, everything that doctor needed, specialist out in Nebraska. And he confirmed the treatment, something called REPOC. Cancer treatments all pretty much have these fancy acronyms. And I'll cover what each of those letters means. I got to know them very well. And the doctor out in Nebraska was very comforting. He'd seen a lot of patients go through this. He was a specialist and had really nice, pleasant demeanor. And at the end of our session with him, he said, "Let's get out there and murder those cancer cells," which I thought was very strange and didn't fit his personality or mine. But I was like, okay, we'll go murder those cancer cells. I'm pretty sure we're going to have to murder a lot of other stuff in my body at the same time. But if that's what we have to do, that's what we're going to do. So July 24th was my first chemo treatment on REPOC. And the first day was all about the R. But first, they said, take your medicines before you come to to the cancer center and get your infusion. So I had to take the prednisone at home, and I took acyclovir, which prevents you from getting shingles, and something called allopurinol, which, if the tumor melts too quickly, thankfully, it causes trouble for your kidneys. So you want to cure your cancer, but not too quickly, and without taking this other precautionary medicine. And I had to take Bactrim in case I got pneumonia at some point. So for a guy who barely ever took a Tylenol, unless I really absolutely positively needed to, that seemed like a lot of medicines, but I hadn't even left my house yet. So when you get to the chemo center on day one, they then give you a couple other names I knew, Benadryl and Tylenol, in case you have an adverse reaction. And then they give you some steroids and anti-nausea medicine, Amend, Aloxi, and dexamethasone. So without getting any chemo, I had already had, I don't know, whatever that is, nine different drugs. Then they start rituximab, which is the smartest and newest of the drugs. That's the R in R-EPOCH. They give it to you over about 6 hours because some people have a bad reaction to it. The chemo goes in through a power port. I had had a surgery a few weeks before where they implanted this device right here. And I don't have a lot of meat on my bones, so it stuck out, just a weird protrusion sticking out. And in my naivete, I thought, oh, they're putting it close to the tumors so they can just spray the chemo on the tumors, like it's a pesticide. That wasn't the case. They put it there for everybody so they can access a larger vein, the artery. They put it in through your arms, they might burn your arms and make your veins completely useless. So they put the rituximab in through my power port for about 6 hours, tolerated it just fine. Then they said, okay, we're ready to send you home with your portable pump and the other medicines. So they bring out this fanny pack, shoulder bag sort of thing, and this toxic-looking Gatorade mix. And inside of that was 3 other drugs. Etoposide, which really does sound like a pesticide that they're going to spray on the tumors. Vincristine, that's also called Oncovan, that's the O. And then the last one is doxorubicin, hydrochloride. That's where the H comes from. And that's what gives it its beautiful orange Gatorade color. And they sent me home with a portable pump. That portable pump drove me crazy, but I had to meditate my way through it. And every few seconds, every 10 seconds or so, every 24 hours, it made a sound. It sounded like a DVD ejecting a DVD player ejecting it. Ramp, 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 ramp. As the medicine went into my body to do its job. And at night, I'd stuff that bag under the pillows and try to drown out the sound. And sometimes I'd forget about it, get up and go to the bathroom and be tethered back to the pump. But I got into a rhythm. And day 2, I'd go back. 24 hours later, they'd refill the pump. Same medications. Day 3, come back Wednesday. Day 4, almost at the end of the week. Refill it one more time. Day 5, I'd go in and they'd give me medicine called Cytoxin. It's like, I don't know where they come up with these names, but it can't possibly sound like it's good for you. But I took it. And then I was disconnected at the end of the week on a Friday. And I felt so free. And I'd go home and take a shower. That was the first thing I'd do, which I hadn't done all week. And I got into this rhythm of the treatment, and I felt like I had mastered it. Get beat down for a week, rise back up, go for my bike rides, go out with my friends, try to live as normal a life as possible, go into my office, try to keep up appearances, and get some work done. And then the next session would roll around 2 weeks later, and I have to go back to chemo jail, I called it. And my son started sleeping in the bed with me because he was worried about me. And he's a very violent geographic sleeper. So the whole night he rotates around the bed, covers every inch, 90 degrees, upside down, a lot of kicking involved. So there I was, on one side with my chemo bag, hunched over it, protecting the thing that was giving me a chance to live. And on the other side, my son, who was giving me a reason to live. But I didn't want him kicking the tubes loose and having chemo spray all over us, so I had to protect them both. Everything was going pretty well. I was getting through it. I was able to manage all the side effects until after round 4. So I was 2/3 of the way through the treatment. And a couple days after that, I got sick. It started with a cough, just like the original cancer had started with a cough. And my son asked me every time I coughed, "Daddy, are you going to die?" The cough got worse, but they cleared me for treatment in round 5, so I decided to go through with it. I figured this is nuclear war on my body. The virus, whatever I have, doesn't stand a chance against the chemo. It'll probably get knocked out. Meanwhile, your immune system is very low during chemo. And round 5 seemed like the steroids boosted me up. I made it through it. And a few days later, after that round had concluded, I got even sicker, and I got strep throat. And my throat was so swollen that I couldn't even cough. Couldn't clear my throat. I had a fever. I did think I might die at that point. And so I called my doctor in Nebraska, doctor murder those cancer cells. And I said, do I have to go through with this, round 6? I had a PET scan a few weeks before. It showed that the tumors were metabolically dead. I knew that the treatment was supposed to be, you get to that point, you do 2 more rounds. And he said, no, Thatcher, we can't drag you into chemo, kicking and screaming. We can't strap you down and make you take the medicine. But I will tell you this. If you choose not to do round 6, you'll be on your own. What he meant was that all the research and scientific studies had been done that proved that 6 was the right number to do. But what I heard, and what I didn't want to feel, was that I didn't want to be alone. And I hadn't been alone. I'd gotten to this point because my family was so supportive and with me. Our friends cooked dinner for us and brought it over. Took my son to soccer games, which I love to do and I wasn't able to do. Had play dates with our daughter. The nurses, all my alternative care practitioners, the Rolfers, the acupuncturists, and everybody. And for someone who doesn't like to ask for help, likes to figure things out on their own, it was hard for me to admit that you can't go through cancer alone. So when my last treatment concluded on November 10th, 2017, just about 3.5 months ago, and I emerged from that building with my wife and thought of my family and everything I'd gone through and just cried. And I think I'm here today on this stage because what I went through is hard. And for me, it's hard to admit that something is hard. I like to make things look easy, right? I don't like people to know how hard I'm working on something. And you can't get through something like this without working hard. I think I'm here in the world today because what I went through worked. And that took a lot of help. It took all the people who were with me and all the people who came before me, including my grandparents. And I think I'm really here because my kids looked at me and asked, "Daddy, are you going to die?" And I said no, and I wanted it to be true. I'm not going out like that. Thank you.